On May 1st, 2019, an attractive girl, dressed only in lingerie and high-heeled shoes, knocked on the door of a house located on her street. In the Nevada desert, it becomes hot early. By the end of May, the real scorching summer is already in full swing, but not to the extent where walking around in lingerie is appropriate. Additionally, the girl appeared disoriented, shifting from foot to foot, as if not fully aware of her actions. The man who opened the door didn't attempt to assure her that she had the wrong address or offer help. He instantly sensed the guest's vulnerability and hurried to invite her inside. After the door closed behind the girl, she experienced a real waking nightmare, and no one saw her again. In 2019, Esmeralda Gonzalez, a popular fashion model with over 300,000 followers on social media, was 24 years old and lived in Las Vegas, Nevada. Nature had gifted her not only with attractive looks, but also with intelligence. She held a bachelor's degree in information and communication and had aspirations to study law. She was also an excellent chess player. Beautiful, smart, and popular, one would think her life should have been wonderful. However, the girl suffered from serious psychological disorders, including schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Her family always believed that they needed to protect Esmeralda from this insane world and took care of her in every way. But in this case, they couldn't shield her from herself and the situation she found herself in. Of course, this doesn't mean that she is to blame for what happened. Mental illness makes a person vulnerable to the outside world, to predators who can instantly sense weakness. And that's exactly what happened to Esmeralda. On May 30th, 2019, Esmeralda turned to her neighbor, Brent Smith, with a request to take her to a BMW dealership because she was having car problems. Brent didn't refuse her and took her to the dealership, then brought her back home. After that, very strange things began to happen. The next time she was seen outside her house, she was walking around her neighborhood in just lingerie and heels. Additionally, Esmeralda appeared disoriented, shifting from foot to foot, and seemed to be out of sorts. Some assumed she was drunk or had taken prohibited substances. Others thought she was having a nervous breakdown. However, the likely reason for her behavior was that she hadn't taken her medication for 2 weeks, medication that helped maintain her mental balance. Esmeralda was asking passers-by to give her a ride somewhere. It's entirely unclear whether she actually needed to go somewhere and why she was dressed like that. At some point, she approached a random house on her street and simply attempted to enter. The shocked homeowners explained that she had the wrong address. If only they had offered her help. Instead of returning to her own house, Esmeralda approached the neighboring house through 2 doors, Christopher Prestopino's house. What she said to him is unknown, but he allowed her to enter. After Esmeralda entered that house, she was never seen again. Not even a day passed after Esmeralda's disappearance when her brother Juan Gonzalez Madera raised the alarm. He couldn't get in touch with his sister and went to her house. He was immediately struck by the fact that the door was open. Not just unlocked, but wide open. The lights were on inside the house, and chaos reigned. Everything was turned upside down, vases shattered, furniture overturned. But all the valuable items, including the girl's phone, remained untouched. Her car was also in the garage. Juan became very agitated and reported his sister's disappearance. While trying to establish Esmeralda's last movements, the police quickly found out that she had gone to the auto center with her neighbor, Brent Smith. The man automatically became a suspect, but after checking surveillance camera footage from the street where Esmeralda and her neighbor lived, the police confirmed that the man had brought the girl home. He was just a friendly, helpful neighbor, and luck wasn't on his side. As the girl went missing shortly after their trip, neighbors reported that the last time they saw Esmeralda was when she entered Christopher Prestopino's house. Surveillance cameras located on the street confirmed this. Christopher was a 45-year-old former convict who had served time in prison for drug-related charges. He was released on parole, and while there were suspicions that he might still be involved in producing illegal substances in his house, there was no evidence of this. He had been working in the audio-visual department of a Las Vegas hotel casino for the past 20 years. In other words, he had a stable job, and even a girlfriend. Overall, it seemed that he had set his life straight and wasn't breaking the law. As a result, the police had nothing to charge him with in relation to Esmeralda's disappearance. Nearly 2 months after Esmeralda's disappearance, there were no breakthroughs in the case when investigators received information from an anonymous source that Christopher Prestopino and his housemate, 39-year-old Cassandra Garrett, had killed a young woman. The anonymous witness didn't know her name but reported that the woman worked as a nighttime dancer, and Christopher had hired her for entertainment purposes. Allegedly, Christopher invited her to his home. They consumed illegal substances together, but at some point, the woman wanted to leave. In response, Christopher tied her to his bed frame. He kept her bound for several days, deliberating over what to do with her, fearing she might report him to the police. Eventually, he killed her. Investigators then contacted the Missing Persons Department and focused on Esmeralda Gonzalez, a model who worked in the adult entertainment industry and lived on the same street as Christopher and Cassandra. Esmeralda hadn't used her phone or bank cards for months, hadn't contacted her family, and the police had reasons to suspect that she might have become a victim of a crime. Detectives interviewed acquaintances of Christopher, including Trisha Ott. Her testimony turned out to be a breakthrough for the investigation. In early June, Christopher had called her early in the morning asking for her help. She came to his house. He behaved strangely and spoke about a young woman. The girl had come to his house where he provided her with illegal substances. Unaware of her mental issues, she began to behave erratically, as if possessed. She threatened to go to the police and accuse Christopher of drugging her. In response, he tied her to a chair to calm her down. Later, he attempted to untie her, but before he could free her hands, she struck him in the face. The situation escalated, and he started to strangle her. He believed he had killed her, but after a while, she regained consciousness. This is what Christopher told Trisha, before stating that he had rented a small truck and asked the woman to help him load a heavy structure into it. Inside the truck were already a concrete mixer and a freezer, both securely tied with tape and ropes. In the garage, wooden pallets held a large wooden and concrete structure. Christopher needed help with that, intending to load it into the truck. However, despite their efforts, he and Trisha couldn't complete the task. They left it there, and the structure remained in Christopher's garage. Christopher offered to drive Trisha home, and they left in the truck. On the way, Christopher disposed of the freezer, cryptically telling Trisha that it would be very bad if someone looked inside it. Later, they stopped at a hotel where Christopher attempted to steal an industrial forklift. Naturally, hotel staff noticed and asked him to leave. Eventually, Trisha got out of the car and she didn't know what Christopher did afterward. Trisha revealed that she hadn't seen the young woman Christopher spoke about or her body, but she did see plastic bags and many cement bags inside his house. Detectives closely examined Christopher's movements in early June. It turned out that on June 6th, between 8:30 and 9 p.m., he was captured by a surveillance camera entering a construction material store where he bought cement, lime, air fresheners, and paid in cash. Detectives wanted to talk to him, but Christopher responded to all police inquiries by claiming he knew nothing, and they had nothing to charge him with. On October 8, 2019, in the desert near Glendale, Nevada, something highly unusual was discovered. In the middle of the desert, someone had discarded a wooden structure containing a massive 950-liter water reservoir filled with a cement mixture. Inside this reservoir, the police found the remains of a young woman, or more accurately, what was left of her. Considering it was Las Vegas, the hottest time of the year, and despite the fact that the body was inside a makeshift concrete grave, the summer heat took its toll. Only the bones remained of the body. Forensic experts obtained DNA from the bones and compared it to the DNA of the young woman's parents. They matched. It was indeed Esmeralda Gonzalez. Determining the cause of death was challenging, but the forensic examiner noted an unnatural chemical odor emanating from the body. The perpetrator had bound the woman's hands, wrapped her head and neck with tape, covered her with blankets and tarpaulin, placed her in the water reservoir, poured concrete, and enclosed her within a wooden frame. Interestingly, the killer didn't steal the victim's belongings, including a $40,000 Rolex watch and a Chanel necklace, photos of which Esmeralda had shared with her followers and which aided in her identification. In the meantime, it was revealed that Christopher's neighbor, Cassandra Garrett, couldn't keep the secret and was telling her acquaintances about her involvement in an intimate encounter with Chris and another girl, an encounter that went awry. Supposedly, Christopher had tied her to a stripper pole in his bedroom and held her captive for several days, deciding what to do next. These rumors quickly reached the police, and by piecing together fragments, they were able to approximate what had happened on that day. On May 31, 2019, when Christopher led Esmeralda into his home, she was incredibly vulnerable due to not taking her medication for the past 2 weeks. Christopher took advantage of this and gave her illicit substances. Coupled with her mental state, this led to her behaving strangely, as if possessed. She wanted to leave and made the mistake of threatening Christopher that she would go to the police and reveal that he had drugged her. This again demonstrates that she didn't take the substances voluntarily. At that point, Christopher tied her up, hoping she would calm down. However, when he attempted to free her, she immediately struck him in the face. This shows that despite her mental state, Esmeralda understood she was in danger, comprehended what was happening, and wanted to escape. In turn, being a conditionally released criminal, Christopher knew the consequences he would face if she reported the incident to the police. Now, he was not only facing charges related to illicit substances, but also kidnapping. Christopher kept the girl tied up for several days. No one knows what he did to her during that time or the conditions she was in. It's uncertain whether he assaulted her, provided her with water and food, or allowed her to use the restroom. The exact extent of Cassandra's involvement remains unclear as well. In any case, the perpetrators came to the conclusion that if they released the girl, she would immediately go to the police, and they needed to find a way to silence her. Christopher and Cassandra started to beat her, but later Cassandra complained to a friend about how surprisingly resilient a person can be. Esmeralda begged her captors to let her go, but they ignored her pleas. Christopher attempted to strangle her, thinking he had killed her, but after a while, Esmeralda regained consciousness. Cassandra laughed at Christopher's futile efforts and decided to take matters into her own hands. Cassandra filled a syringe with a pool cleaning substance and injected it into Esmeralda's body. Typically, pool cleaning chemicals contain a variety of components, none of which are associated with life. Chlorine is usually the main ingredient, intended to eliminate bacteria, microbes, and fungi present in the pool. The exact duration of Esmeralda's torment remains unknown, but her death was agonizing. Throughout the process, Esmeralda was fully conscious. She felt her tissues deteriorating from the inside, her mucous membranes inflaming, a burning sensation in her eyes, swelling in her throat, chest pain, rapid breathing, and ultimately the inability to breathe at all, not to mention the accompanying sensations of burning and nausea. Indeed, at some point, Christopher probably regretted ever opening the door to the girl. After crossing that Rubicon, he needed to figure out what to do with the body. How could he get it out of the house and create as much distance as possible between himself and it? He knew that the missing girl would be searched for, and the last place she was seen was near his house. He had to think about where to hide the body so that it wouldn't be found and how to get rid of the smell of decay. In early June, Christopher appeared on surveillance cameras when he entered a building supplies store. He bought 5 30-kilogram bags of cement, other necessary items for mixing cement, as well as lime, which is believed to eliminate the smell of decomposition. He took a week off from work and got to work. He placed the body in a large water tank, sprinkled lime and poured cement mixture, then constructed a wooden frame around the reservoir. When everything was ready, he rented a truck. Theoretically, this could have given him the opportunity to transport the structure to the desert and abandon it without drawing attention. But Christopher Prestipino turned out to be his own worst enemy. He needed help with transporting such a heavy structure, so he involved his acquaintances, including Tricia. This allowed the police to uncover the case. When you involve other people, you should expect them to have questions. The question arises, what about Christopher's girlfriend, 31-year-old Lisa Mort? Did she know about what happened? When the police discovered Esmeralda's body, Lisa was under arrest in connection with unrelated charges, but she made the foolish decision to call her boyfriend and tell him to flee urgently. She tried to speak in code, but it didn't help much. Lisa was charged with complicity in the crime. Christopher listened to his girlfriend and left for Belize, but returned just a week later. He was arrested directly at the airport. Cassandra was detained on October 18th. Christopher and Cassandra were charged with first-degree kidnapping, second-degree murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. Despite Christopher's earlier attempt to escape to Belize, the judge ruled that he could be released on a bail of $500,000. Christopher managed to pay this amount. However, the judge later reversed the decision, and the man awaited the start of the trial in custody. The trial was postponed in November 2020 due to the man being placed in a psychiatric hospital. The process began on April 25, 2023. Christopher and Cassandra tried to shift blame for Esmeralda's murder onto each other. Cassandra claimed she knew nothing about the crime and was surprised when her neighbor bought a large amount of cement. When Cassandra asked why he needed the cement, Christopher said he was building a kitchen island, even though they already had one. In turn, Christopher blamed everything on Cassandra, claiming she helped him dispose of the body, and the girl's death was unintentional. He assured that he didn't know how she died and regretted ever meeting Cassandra. Christopher faced a potential life sentence, so he made a plea agreement. He didn't admit guilt, but acknowledged that the prosecution had sufficient evidence to prove his guilt. He was sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. Cassandra admitted guilt in the murder, committed in a state of emotional turmoil, and was sentenced to 8 to 20 years. Lisa admitted guilt in aiding and abetting murder and received a sentence of 2 to 5 years in prison. Despite the fact that those responsible for what happened to Esmeralda are in prison, several questions remain unanswered. First of all, what happened to the girl's house? Did she turn everything upside down herself? Did a burglar break in, taking advantage of the unlocked door, or did Christopher do it? But most likely, a burglar would have taken the phone and other valuables, and Christopher was likely afraid to break into the house of the girl he had already abducted. Therefore, it's more likely that Esmeralda did it herself, as she wasn't quite herself without medication. Also, it's intriguing how the police figured out what was inside the strange structure found in the desert. They probably received its description from Trisha Ott, and when they discovered it in the desert, they already suspected what might be inside. Lastly, it's unclear whether Esmeralda approached Christopher's door accidentally or not. The defendant claimed that he and Cassandra hired Esmeralda for intimate services. In turn, the prosecution believed that the girl approached his door accidentally while not being in her right mind, after which she experienced a true nightmare and fell into the hands of two monsters.